Okay. A lot of times when people go from yeshiva to recruit, they have their drasha that they give, their talk that they give, and they give it in every yeshiva. And I have a very hard time doing it. Just by nature, I have a hard time doing it, even if nobody there was in the other place. Just my nature is that it feels a little disingenuous to give the same talk again. I know what I'm saying breaks a lot of speaking norms where people have a talk that they take off the shelf and they say, okay, I'm going to give this talk, but I don't operate that way. I also have talks and then I have to change them and move it around and update it and say something else. But for today, I want to share something that gets a little bit to the core of why I'm here without speaking about why I'm here. Because you know why I'm here. I'm here because I'm a menal in Lander College for Men, Beis Medrash Talmud, and I have the tremendous chus to be joined by our dean, by Dean Abramson, who's just a tremendous part of the experience at Landers, and I enjoy every day that we get to work together. So I want to speak about the concept of merging the learning Avodas Hashem part of our lives with the studies, Parnasa, more outside the Beis Medrash part of our lives, from the perspective of the parshiyos that we're learning. And I think that will say more about what the hashkafa of the yeshiva is than if I would sit here and bore you with the hashkafa of the yeshiva. Okay? So, interesting, in yesterday's Kriya is really the first record of land being bought in Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu, after he meets Esav, and Baruch Hashem, they part in peace. Vayiken es chelkas hasodeh, Yaakov buys a plot of land in Eretz Yisrael. And the truth is that land, this concept of having land in Eretz Yisrael, really comes up in the beginning of the parsha. Because when Yaakov Avinu sent this very multi-layered, multi-dimensional message to Esav, which he probably had to listen to on many layers. One of the things he said to him is that I lived by Lavan and I have oxen and donkeys, vahili shar v'chamar tzayin ve'eved v'shivcha. And Rashi tells us that one of the underlying messages that Yaakov was trying to tell Esav is that you're so angry at me that I stole the brachos that our father intended to give you. I just want to mention that our father said that we're going to have the dew from the Shemayim and the earth, the Mishmanei Haaretz, the robust, growth from the earth. I don't have Tala Shemayim. I don't have Shmanei Haaretz. I don't have any land. I just have animals. So, and if you read that Rashi simply, it sounds like Yaakov is kind of throwing his father under the bus to save himself to his brother. Doesn't it sound that way? Like my father said that our father said that I was going to have land, and you're so angry at me that he said that to me. Don't worry, I don't have any. You're not comfortable with that, are you? That can't possibly be the pshat that like the bracha didn't come true. Don't worry. I don't think that we can accept such a thing. So I want to show you how we can track this idea of having animals versus having land much further back than Yaakov and Esav. We can track it back to Cain and Hevel. Because Cain was an Oved Adama. He worked the ground. And Hevel was a Royei Tzayin. Vayhili shar v'chamar tzayin ve'eved v'shivcha. Hevel was a shepherd. So there you have another two brothers, earlier in history, where one brother owned land and the other brother was a shepherd. And Chazal tell us that Hevel didn't own land on purpose. Hevel didn't want to be so bound to the land because the land was cursed from Adam Arishain's Chet. And Hevel said, I want to remove myself from the areas that are wrapped in einish or in punishment and in negativity. I don't want to plug into that. So I'm going to be a shepherd. It's a little bit, even though the sheep do need to sustain themselves from the ground, but it's a little bit more, Shalom Aleichem, it's a little bit more removed from the, a little bit more removed. It's good to see you. And it's interesting that both Cain and Esav, you see the parallel there, both Cain and Esav had an opportunity to reach higher than their brother. When Hashem accepted the carbon of Hevel, and he did not accept the carbon of Cain, so Cain was very disappointed. And you have to understand that Cain wasn't necessarily, at least in the beginning of his journey, wasn't a bad guy. In a certain sense, he understood his mission differently. I mean, think about it. Hevel wasn't willing to work the ground. He wasn't willing to bring karbanos from the ground. He wanted to just try to find the most spiritual things possible to engage in. But Cain was an Oved Adama. Cain was willing to find a way to serve Hashem, even from that ground that Hashem had cursed. That's a big job. And when Cain was disappointed that it was easier for Hevel to serve Hashem than it was for him, Hevel's carbon was accepted immediately. Hevel didn't struggle in his avodas Hashem the way Cain did. Hashem said to Cain, Lama charalach, why are you in so much pain? V'lama naflu panecha, why are you so disappointed? Haloyim teitiv, if you'll continue to do good, se'es, you'll be lifted up higher than your brother, the Ramban says. Im teitiv se'es, and it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if like we were talking about this a little over Shabbos, like if the dean and I would walk into a gym, and we would both have a personal trainer, and my personal trainer would put 50 pounds on the bar that he wants me to lift, and his personal trainer would put 100 pounds on the bar. So when we start, I would be the big bal gaiva. I can go much faster. 50 is a lot easier to lift than 100. And he may even be very disappointed. I'm not able to lift it as quickly and as vigorously as Sonnenschein is able to. But at the end of the day, he's going to learn how to lift 100-pound weights. I won't. And ultimately, the one that's going to end up stronger is going to be him. And that's the message that Hashem told Cain. Stick with it. You took a harder job. The land is harder than the animals. Halayim teitiv se'es. And the truth is that was supposed to be the mission of Yaakov and Esav together. There's a sefer, when Rav Kook was a Rav in Europe before he came to Eretz Yisrael. Apparently he had a notebook on his desk that he would fill with all kinds of different thoughts and in halacha, in machshava, in gemara, all kinds of different things. It's printed today. It's called Metzios Katan. It's a sefer of his notes before he moved to Eretz Yisrael. And in there are a lot of gems. I got the sefer because I thought it would be like a window into the development of Rav Kook, which is a fascinating idea. So that's why I got the sefer. I have it for a few years. I'm about halfway through it. Anyway, he says there a very interesting thing. He says that when Yaakov came in to get the brachas, he says that something bothered Yitzchak. As we know, Yitzchak was a little suspicious. Didn't think it was Esav. He said, Gishana va'amushcha b'ni. Come closer, I want to feel you. Ha'ato zeh b'ni Esav. Are you truly my son Esav? And ultimately, when he came closer and he smelled him, he didn't comment on if he felt like Esav. He said, Re'ei reach b'ni kereach hasada asher bercha Hashem. He commented on the smell of Esav. Now, there are 5 senses, and As we know, the Sfarim say the most physical of the senses is the sense of touch. The most spiritual of the senses is the sense of smell. And Yitzchak was commenting, I expected the sense of touch to stand out, and what I'm getting is the sense of smell. Because Yitzchak knew that Yaakov and Esav were different people. And Yitzchak knew that Yaakov was a person wrapped in spirituality and growth and limud haTorah, Yoshev Halim. He knew that about Yaakov. And he knew that Esav was an Ish Sadeh. He knew that Esav was out in the fields and hunting, and he knew that. He did not know what a big Russia Esav was. That the Hashgacha concealed from him. But he thought that the partnership between Yaakov and Esav was the most incredible idea of a partnership. That Yaakov would sit in the Beis Medrash and he would spend so much time and energy and effort and yigia, night after night, day after day, uncovering what Hashem wants. And then he would give that over to Esav, who would then run with it and fill the world with the presence of Hashem. That's a partnership. And between the two of them, they would have this access to the Ratzah in Hashem and this ability to affect the entire world. And Yitzchak wanted to give a bracha to Esav so that he has the koyach to do that. And that was the brachas that Yaakov stole. The reason Yaakov stole those brachas is because Yaakov knew that Esav wasn't out there spreading the word of Hashem. Esav was out there taking from the world, not giving to it. And someone who's out in the world to take from it and not give to it is not a partner in spreading the word of Hashem. So Yaakov went into Yitzchak and listened to what he told him. To us it sounds like a terrible lie. But if you think about it, it wasn't a lie at all. He said to Yitzchak, Anoichi Esav b'chayrecha. I am Esav, your Bechar. Translation, Esav's not being Esav. Esav's not doing the job. Esav's not being my partner here. So I'm going to have to do both parts of the job. I'm going to have to be the one that sits in the Beis Medrash, and I'm going to have to be the one that's out there in the world. Somehow my children, my descendants are going to have to cover both angles. As you know, they used to say that Rachel should marry Yaakov and Leah should marry Esav. What happened? Rachel married the Yaakov part of Yaakov, and Leah married the Esav part of Yaakov. Because Yaakov had to join both parts of the mission into one person. Now, as we explained before, when Hashem spoke to Cain, he said, your job is harder, and if you could do that job, it's even greater. And that's why yesterday we learned Yaakov Avinu talking to Esav and telling him, even telling his own servants, his own messengers, this is what you should say to my master Esav. Why is he my master? Why is he the master of Yaakov? Yaakov was saying, Esav, I want to give you one more chance. I know I stole the brachas, and they were meant for you, but you weren't doing the job. I had to take them. But I want to give you one more chance. If you'll work with me, you'll be the Adain here. You'll be the hero. And that's the pshat that he said that he doesn't have the land yet. He's saying, our father said that I was going to have land. There's still hope for you. Land, like by Cain, represents the most physical, the lowest part of the work. And you have the ability to lift that up to Hashem. I didn't get the land yet. He wasn't throwing his father under the bus. He was saying there's still hope for you to be the recipient of that bracha if you'll join me. And that's why he speaks to Esav as if he's so great, because Esav had an opportunity then to be so great. When Esav said, sorry, I'm moving on. I'm not doing this with you. When Esav said that, so Yaakov had no choice. And what's the first thing that Yaakov did? Vayiken es chelkas hasada. The first thing he did was to buy land. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Vayiken is the letters Vikayin. I don't think that's a coincidence. That just like Cain owned land, Yaakov now had to own land. to represent that Yaakov has to do both parts of the job. And in Klal Yisrael, that's the way it's always been. We had a Yisachar and Zevulun. It's always been that way, that there's been a part of our nation that was completely enveloped in the absolute full plugging into the Ratzon Hashem, almost not living on this world, like Klal Yisrael in the Midbar. And then there was always those who would reach out and be the ones to figure out how to translate the Ratzon Hashem into the world. And there are different examples of that throughout different parts of Klal Yisrael. Like, for example, you had the difference between the Sanhedrin and the king in Klal Yisrael. It was always that was the difference. The Sanhedrin was about pure Torah. The king was how to implement the Ratzon Hashem in Klal Yisrael. All the kings that we had that ability. This is what the Drashas Haran says, that the kings had the ability to take the will of Hashem and to implement it and to translate it and to show how we could live our regular lives, our regular mundane lives of building bridges and tunnels and planting fields and interacting with other nations and writing treaties and going to war and all the things a nation does, Kichal Hagayim, like all the nations of the world. And the king was the one who did the Esav part. Not that I'm calling the king Esav. I'm calling the king Adoni. I'm calling the king Esav had he been successful. And I want to tell you about another part of Klal Yisrael. There's another part of Klal Yisrael that also accepted the challenge of Cain, which Cain did not accept, accepted the challenge of Esav, which Esav did not accept, accepted the challenge of Malchus, which our kings, most of them, did accept, and that is women. The role of women in Klal Yisrael is a very similar thing. I want to tell you something fascinating. When a person has a son, he has a ben. The Maharal says that a ben is a lashon of binyan, of building. Right? Ibane mimenu. I'm built through my children. They're an extension of myself. A bas doesn't mean building. A daughter doesn't mean building. But the Maharal says that in Aramaic, in Targum, in the language that we use to translate, there the word daughter is binas, which does mean building. Why is the word building for a son in Hebrew and the word building for a woman, for a daughter, is in translation? The reason is because again, this is overall, all of us have a little bit of both, the ability to do both. Women have the ability to do both, and men have the ability to do both. But in general, when you have a husband and wife, the obligation to learn Torah, that's on the husband. And the translation of it, when I'm sitting with my son's 5th grade teacher and the teacher says that he's not behaving in math, and I have to know how to interact with that teacher, I have to be able to translate what Hashem wants. I can't, there's no Gemara about that. I have to have that talent of translation, of implementation, of being able to transform the holiness that I absorbed into my mundane life and be able to live like a ben Torah, to live like a person whose influence is coming from the Torah, even in areas that it doesn't say. You know, I'm driving to a wedding with a bunch of friends and we're schmoozing in the car. There's no place in Shulchan Aruch that it says what we should schmooze about. It says a lot of things that we should not schmooze about. Okay, that's true, that we know. That's in the Torah. It doesn't say what we should schmooze about. I'm dating a girl. There's no place in Shulchan Aruch that it says who I should marry. It doesn't say it. There's certain things it says about who I should not marry, but it doesn't say who I should marry. The knowledge of how to translate who I am, translate what I've learned into life, that's something that's the Esav part of our lives. The going out into the world part, and that's something that women have a unique talent in. We should all be zeicha to find wives that have that ability to translate what we did here in yeshiva, to translate that, to build beautiful, beautiful homes, to be able to raise beautiful children, to be able to have the wisdom to understand those children, to be able to keep a home going. And you know something else? There's another area of another group of people that also were given the chance to join this kind of partnership with the Jewish people, and they failed that challenge. And that was the Yavanim. That was the Greeks. Because the Yavanim also have something beautiful. It's external, but they have something beautiful to add to the world of Kedusha. Yafta leikim liyefes, Hashem said. This beauty, Yefes, which is the Greek world, has beauty to it. V'yishkain ba'alei shem, and it should dwell in the tents of shame. The Mishnah says in Shkalim that there were 3 boxes in the Beis HaMikdash, and according to one man, the Amar, the 3 boxes didn't say Aleph, Beis, Gimel on them. It said Alpha, Beta, Gamla on them. It was Greek letters. And the Mefarshim say, why were the Greek letters in the Beis HaMikdash? Because Greek is a beautiful language. It's not a holy language. It's a very external language. It's externally beautiful. But had they taken the challenge, they could have transformed the Torah into something that the world could see its beauty. According to one man Amar in Masechta Megillah, the only language that you're allowed to translate Torah into is Greek. That means that, think about the idea. It's the same idea again, that there's a world of Kedusha that's our Torah, and there's a way to translate it so the world could see how gorgeous it is. The Greeks, instead of doing that, they forced us to translate the Torah into Greek in a way that was not positive, for not positive reasons. They distorted that. Fascinatingly, and I'm going to end with this, fascinatingly, a few days ago, I was in yeshiva, and I said to a group of about 40 guys, I'm going to end with this. And you heard that? And then I turned to a guy next to me and I said, when I say I'm going to end with it, I'm not one of those guys that doesn't really end with it, right? I do end with it. And he was like, it got very awkward in the room. But anyway, I am going to end with this. The Torah tells us 4 animals. When it's listing the animals that we're not allowed to eat, there are 4 animals that are mentioned specifically. The Gamel, the Chazir, the Arneves, there's 4 animals that are mentioned specifically. The Mefarshim say that they represent the 4 nations, that we were in Galus by those nations. The Chazir represents Edom, Esav, and so on. The one that represents Yavan is the Arneves. I'm going to leave it to the dean to try to figure out what an Arneves is.
It's a hair or a rabbit, right?
That's what they say. Yeah. Okay. But the interesting thing is that all of the animals mentioned are in Lashon Zachar. The Arneves is in Lashon Nekeva. It's an Arnev. Yeah. The female form is an Arneves. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh says that the ones that are in male form, the impurity, the problem comes from the male side. The ones that are in female form, the impurity comes from the female side. And I think I just explained to you why, by Yavan, it came from the female side. Because the Isha, the female, is the one who has the talent to be able to translate the Kedusha into the world. And that's what Yavan was supposed to do. But instead, they decided to detach from the world of holiness and to create a culture of their own that denies holiness and denies what we have to offer to the world. And that's why they're the Arneves. That's why they're Belashon Nekeva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give all of us the ability to do our Yaakov job and to do our Esav job. To do our Yaakov job is the amount that we actually plug into pure holiness. To do our Esav job, not like Esav, is where we could take that into the world with us. I started off by saying that in the honor of my first time speaking with the dean here, that I want to talk a little bit about the collaboration that we do without actually explaining it. But this that I spoke about today, this is the neshama of what we do. That we want to be able to stay plugged into a world of Torah and a world of holiness, but we want to support a person's ability to be able to spread that holiness out into the world in his parnasa and building his home and in his education, that it should be able to serve the Kedusha and the growth of each person. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry to interrupt your second Seder.
I was wanting to introduce Rabbi Friedman. Very much to meet with Rabbi Friedman.